One of the most important phenomena of the 20th century has been the international expansion of industry. Today, virtually all major firms have a significant and growing presence in business outside their country of origin. All international trade is based on the recognition that an organization can buy things from a supplier in one country, use logistics to move them, and then sell them at a profit in another country. Efficient communications, transport, financial arrangements, and trading agreements allow materials to be moved long distances at relatively low cost. Then international logistics adds value by increasing place and possibly ownership utility. Some of the benefits of international operations include purchase of products and materials at lower prices, access to low-cost operations, geographic expansion into new areas and markets, expansion or consolidation of operations to get economies of scale, improvement in profit margins, encouragement of innovation and diversification into new products, a new market for products that are near the end of their life cycles in domestic markets. What are the factors that encourage the international trade? With rare exceptions, governments are keen to encourage international trade as a way of improving national prosperity. Over the years, they have signed many agreements on trade and formed international organizations like the World Trade Organization. Most significantly, they have built free trade areas such as the European Union, North American Free Trade Association, Mercosur in South America, and the African Union. Many other factors have encouraged this growth in international trade. Growing prosperity. As countries and geographical regions become more prosperous, they demand greater volumes of products. The scale of growth often cannot be met by local suppliers. Demand for foreign products. Customers travel, watch television, surf the web, see films, and use telephones to see different types of products that are available in other areas. This creates a demand for new products that are specifically made by foreign companies. Convergence of market demands. Centralized manufacturing only works if different markets accept the same product, or at least products with minor differences in the finishing. Removal of trade barriers. A major force towards global free trade was the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, which stipulated that all its members should be treated equally. Countries in several regions have taken this idea further to create free trade areas that ease trade restrictions and reduce tariffs. Manufacturers' economies of scale. Significant changes in manufacturing mean that many operations are more efficient with stable, large-scale production. The best size for facilities is often larger than the demand from a single market. Hence, centralized production with its economies of scale and lower unit costs can make produce that are cheaper than locally produced ones. Integration of the supply chain. Integration of the supply chain works towards a smooth movement of goods from initial suppliers through to final customers. This only becomes possible when national frontiers are transparent and the same organization works on both sides of the border. More demands on suppliers. Customers are putting greater demands on suppliers, including new products, low prices, fast delivery, just-in-time operations, total quality and customization. Local suppliers may not be able to meet these demands, and organizations may have to look further afield to find the best sources. Improved communications. The web, internet, e-business, mobiles, and other growing channels of communication have meant that physical separation is less relevant, and it is almost as easy to do business with a partner on the other side of the world as it is to visit the next town. Changed practices in logistics. Development in logistics make long-distance trade easier. For instance, containerization made the movement of goods easier, faster, cheaper, and more reliable. Postponement allows products to finish manufacture at a later point in the supply chain, giving more customization and flexibility in meeting demands. Intermodal facilities make it easier to move goods between transport modes, larger ships can transport more goods, and so on. The overall result from many of the above effects is that the cost of transport has declined. Virtually all major companies work internationally. We know the advantages of working internationally, but what actually triggers the expansion from their home market? In reality, there are many factors in this decision, ranging from the serious, perhaps forecast for long-term economic growth, through to the trivial, maybe senior managers want to do some traveling. Hopefully, the serious considerations carry more weight in this difficult decision that needs a clear understanding of the benefits and problems. In particular, the incentive for international operations comes from a business strategy that includes a theme of global expansion. Only when higher strategies set the scene, the logistics move towards global training. But this raises the question of how to actually start international operations. Imagine a manufacturer that wants to sell products in a new international market. There are essentially 6 possible arrangements with the following list in order of increasing investment and risk. First one is licensing or franchising. Here the manufacturer passes all operations to a local company and allows it to make equivalent products. In return for a fee or royalties, the manufacturer allows the local company to use its processes, designs, operations, trademarks, brands, knowledge, or other skills that it passes across. The licensee is responsible for operations in the new market, and the manufacturer retains some control through negotiated conditions for quality, testing, material sales, and so on. This arrangement has the advantages of needing little capital, having low risk, using the licensee's knowledge of local conditions, reducing costs by using existing facilities and skills, and avoiding local import tariffs and quotas. The most frequent disadvantages are lack of the manufacturer's control over products sold in its name, limited returns to the manufacturer, and the development of a potential new competitor. Next arrangement is exporting finished goods. Here the manufacturer continues making products in its own facilities, but uses local companies to distribute them. There are several variations on this theme, which include local marketing, trading companies, freight forwarding, distribution, and other intermediaries who provide an export service. The benefits of exporting are that it still uses the expertise of local companies and existing facilities, but now with support from expert intermediaries who handle the trading and import arrangements. As there is no local manufacturing, the domestic company needs less investment, and the exporter can achieve economies of scale. On the other hand, exports contribute least to the local economy, so government often add tariffs, import quotas, currency restrictions, or some other constraints. The success of a product also depends on the skills of export intermediaries, over which neither the manufacturer nor domestic company have much control. So, a manufacturer runs the risk of increasing production to satisfy a demand that largely depends on the success of other companies. Setting up a local sales and distribution network. In this variation, products are still exported to meet local demand, but the manufacturer increases its control of the supply chain by replacing the local distribution company with its own subsidiary. This gives the manufacturer more control of distribution, which it runs itself, but for this it needs a greater investment in the country and more knowledge of local conditions. In particular, it must know enough about local markets and logistics, or be able to attract enough people with the necessary knowledge and skills. Exporting parts and using local assembly and finishing. This moves into the area of partnerships, where the manufacturer develops a closer supplier-customer relationship with a local assembler. Essentially, the manufacturer exports product kits which a local firm assembles. This needs significant facilities in the local market, which bring the advantage of using more local knowledge and skills. Local operations might be cheaper and so reduce costs and there is certainly a chance to reduce transport costs. Perhaps more importantly, this approach adds some local value, but the limited local content of such screwdriver operations mean that they are not necessarily popular with host countries and are often seen as a means of gaining skills that can be developed for future opportunities. At the same time, the manufacturer loses control over key assembly operations, which depend on the local assembler. An option here is to start in a small way, perhaps with postponement, to customize products for the local market, and if this is a success, to keep adding more local operations. Joint venture with a local company. With this option, the manufacturer might want to open full production in the new market, but it does not have the necessary finance, resources, skills, or some other key requirements. Then it might look for a joint venture with a local company, where they start a new company which is jointly owned by the two. This has the advantages of less risk and investment than full local production, while still allowing the manufacturer considerable control over operations. Often this is the only realistic way of entering a new market that restricts foreign ownerships. Full local production. This is the extreme case where the manufacturer opens full production facilities within the new market to make and distribute its products. Opening full production can be very expensive and time-consuming. Often companies ease the organization and commitment by setting up a local subsidiary. Then if problems arise, there is some separation between the local company and its parent. A faster way of getting a significant presence is to buy a company that is already working locally. If a firm already works successfully in a market, a larger company can buy it, inject cash, and build on its assets. The essential feature of local production is that the manufacturer retains control over all operations, and it reduces transport, operating costs, and the effort needed to import goods. On the other hand, it has the disadvantages of needing greater investment and long-term commitment, and it is vulnerable to changes in local conditions and exchange rates. Organizations might like the control, potential profits, avoidance of tariffs and import quotas that come with full production facilities. On the other hand, few can afford the investment and risk, or manage the complex and uncertain operations. The best choice depends on many factors such as the firm's strategic aims, capital available, attitude towards risk, target return on investment, time scale, local knowledge, transport costs, tariffs, trade restrictions, available workforce, and others. Then they might do some calculations to compare options. This might lead to a more cautious approach, typically expanding their foreign operations in a series of steps. In effect, they move down the list, slowly increasing their investment and only moving on when each previous stage has proved successful. We know that international trade does not necessarily mean that the firm has to work internationally itself. As we saw in the last lecture, it can use various intermediaries to deal with its foreign operations. But someone has to move goods over frontiers, even if it is left to a transport company, and this leads to the inevitable principle that international trade means international companies. These companies have to deal with the different conditions and regulations that they meet in each country. Sometimes this can be dramatically different on either side of an international border. A company has to find the most appropriate organizational structure for dealing with these variations, and for this it has four main options. National companies, which only work within their home market. If they want a presence in international markets, they export to marketing organizations in foreign countries, perhaps offering factory gate prices. International companies, which have facilities in different countries but are centered on one home country. The headquarters and often the main operations are located in this home country with subsidiaries in all other areas. The headquarters controls the activities of all subsidiaries. Multinational companies. They work more widely and form a more loosely linked largely independent set of companies working in different geographical regions. This arrangement is often described as a multi-domestic organization with no rigid control from a central headquarters. The separate divisions have more flexibility to adjust operations and products to local needs. Global companies, they see the world as a single market. They make standard products for shipment anywhere in the world using the locations where they can work most effectively and efficiently. The main feature of global organizations is that they coordinate all their activities as if they supply a single market. Coca-Cola, for example, make the same products around the world with all operations coordinated to meet demand as efficiently as possible. These descriptions may be misleading as they suggest that organizations choose a single best organization and use it for all the operations. In reality, firms always have to be flexible enough to respond to local conditions, practices, and demands. This generally needs a looser structure that includes aspects of the different types of operations but gives a unified culture for the overall organization. What are the benefits of global operations? There are clear advantages in working globally from both a logistics and operations points of view. Global organizations limit the range of products, concentrate research and development, ensure economies of scale, remove duplicated functions, simplify management structures, simplify the product design functions, simplify management structures, use standard processes, and so on. They coordinate all activities to make sure they are done in the best way and in the best places, to provide efficient and seamless operations. Whatever organizational structure is chosen, logistics managers have to design supply chains to actually move materials around the world. They have to ask questions about the structure of the chain. There is no single best model for global supply chains, so each organization has to find its own solution that comes closest to satisfying all its needs. The result is that global supply chains come in a huge variety of forms. Nonetheless, they do have common features, and the following list outlines 6 options. First one, outsource logistics. As we saw, the simplest way for companies to enter international markets is to license local firms to use their designs, brand name, operations, specialized knowledge, and so on. This effectively passes all responsibility to a local firm and means that the licensing firm does not get involved with any global logistics. This may not seem like a strategy for global logistics, but of course it is a viable option, accepting that other organizations can do the logistics better than the licensee. Next one, global operations with limited needs for logistics. Not all global organizations need global or even complex supply chains. For instance, McDonald's works globally, but practicalities demand that it does not have an extended supply chains to move products around the world. Most of its suppliers are sourced locally, supply chains are short, and its customers are local. This means that even a huge organization working globally in thousands of locations can have relatively simple supply chain. Concentrating production and sourcing in one area and then selling globally. This is an exporting strategy that gives logistics the relatively straightforward job of moving materials from local suppliers into the company, but then a complex job of distributing finished products from a single location to international customers. The manufacturer is a pure exporter with global marketing and distribution rather than global operations. This model is also the most vulnerable to external pressures, as it is widely seen as concentrating economic benefits in the center. Concentrating production in one center, but buying materials and selling products globally. Again, this is an exporting strategy, but now with global sourcing collecting materials from anywhere in the world, followed by global marketing to sell products to customers in any location. This gives the most difficult logistics where both the inward and outward flows are complicated. However, it is more popular than with host countries as it spreads the economic benefits more widely, even though the main value-adding activities are still concentrated in one location. Postponement to move the finishing or of production down the supply chain. This is aligned to a strategy of local assembly, typically with limited facilities for finishing products. This adds some local value, but all components are generally imported from main production centers. So there is a complex problem with inbound logistics to the main production centers, then a relatively straightforward movement to local finishers, followed by fairly straightforward distribution to customers. When the finishing is done by local firms, they almost invariably use their local knowledge to organize the distribution to customers as well. And lastly, operating as a local company with local suppliers and customers. This is aligned to a strategy of full local production, typically for a multinational company. Then both inward and outward logistics are easier as they are organized relatively locally. This is the most popular approach with host countries as it develops local skills and brings economic benefit. But it means that operations are vulnerable to changing local conditions. It also means that the independent parts lose much of the benefits of size, so the local firms are likely to look for growth that allows them to export, and this increases the complexity of the supply chains. International logistics are inevitably complicated and present a whole new range of problems for managers. There is a surprising number of people involved in even a small transaction and a surprising number of possible difficulties. Some of the difficulties are practical, such as physically moving materials across a frontier and organizing transport over longer distances. Some are cultural, such as speaking new languages and meeting different customer demands. Some are economic, such as obtaining local currency to pay local taxes and tariffs. As the European Union moved towards a single market, it identified three types of problems that are due to physical barriers, such as natural features, international borders, customs procedures; technical barriers, such as different communications infrastructure, safety standards; and fiscal barriers, such as tax regimes, rates of value-added tax, and excise duty. We can add some details to this list and illustrate some typical problems that managers face with international logistics. First one, political and legal systems. The types of government and legal systems give significantly different trading conditions in different countries. Practices that are accepted in one country may be unacceptable and even illegal in a neighboring country. Economic conditions. Often aligned with political systems are the economic conditions, with significant differences in prosperity, disposable income, and spending habits. Technology available. Logistics companies often need sophisticated technologies for e-commerce, satellite locations, in-cab navigation, real-time routing, and a whole range of other activities. Of course, this does not mean that every logistics company uses the highest technology available or that the technology is available in every location. Most of the world does not have access to, does not need, or cannot afford the latest technology. Infrastructure. The quality of infrastructure varies widely, with particular differences between developed and industrializing regions. For instance, it is normal practice to use containers in many regions, but there are a few large container ports in the whole of Africa. Social systems and culture. It is usually easier to trade with someone who has similar culture, habits, expectations, languages, and so on. And it is easier for a company working in Belgium to open new facilities in France than, say, Iran. You might assume that these differences are only important if dealing with widely separate locations, but many people who live very close together seem to have very little in common, while other people who live far apart seem to be closely related. Finance. There can be many difficulties with finance, particularly when banking systems are not well developed. Some countries do not allow their currency to be exported. The value of some currencies fluctuates widely or falls quickly. Some banking systems are inefficient. Sometimes exchanging money is difficult. Credit and debit cards do not work. Interest rates are high. Local tax regimes are difficult, and so on. Competition in logistics. Historically, many countries felt that transport was a sufficiently important national resource to need close control or even government ownership. The result was a small, tightly regulated industry with little or no competition. This is far less frequent now following widespread privatization and deregulation, but you can still see the effects in, for example, national airlines. The amount of competition in logistics still varies widely and ranges between intense market-driven competition through to state-run monopolies. Geography. Transport is normally easier in straight lines over flat terrain. So crossing the American prairies is easy, but problems grow in the Rockies to the west. Physical barriers hinder transport, and these can include seas, mountain ranges, deserts, jungles, rivers, cities, national parks, and others. Customs. It is often the practical detail that make the movement of materials across international frontiers time-consuming and irritating, and you hear of deliveries that are held up for days simply because the driver cannot speak the same language as the customs people. Documentation. Traditionally, it has taken a lot of paperwork to move goods internationally. Much of this is now handled electronically, and free trade areas have removed the need for most administration. But there can still be problems, largely when each country sets its own regulations and requirements. Any mistakes in documentation can cause a lot of misunderstanding and long delays. The most common documents needed to move goods internationally are: Certificate of Origin shows the country in which the goods were produced, to assess tariffs, comply with government restrictions on trade, and allow statistical recording. Commercial Invoice is written by the supplier to describe the materials carried and the terms of trade. This allows goods to move through customs and is the invoice that must be paid by the customer. Packing List gives the detailed contents of each package in the shipment and is used by customs and in any insurance claims. Bill of Lading or Waybill is issued by a shipping company or other transport operator and is a contract for carrying materials, defining legal responsibilities, and is used to transfer ownership to named parties. Commercial Letter of Credit is a contract between the customer and a bank which transfers responsibility for paying for materials to the bank. Bill of Exchange is a means of arranging payments for materials by requesting the customer's bank to collect and transfer payment to the supplier's bank. Insurance Certificate explains the type of insurance covered for the materials. International frontiers. As you can see, many problems of global logistics actually occurs at borders, at the point when goods are trying to leave one country and enter another. On the whole, entering a new country is more difficult than leaving an old one. Each border can mean different conditions and restrictions on movement, and tariffs to be paid. Even paying the tariffs is not always easy, as there can be a range of different taxes, duties, and rates in the calculations. If materials cross a series of frontiers, they might in principle have to pay these costs at each, but countries rarely charge duties of materials that are simply moving through, meaning that duty only becomes payable at the final destination. To allow normal operations, ports are normally declared as duty-free zones, which means that duty only becomes payable when materials leave the port. These zones can be extended to duty-free warehouses or larger areas around container ports, where goods are stored until they are taken to the final customer. Supply chain intermediaries. Not surprisingly, in such a complex field, a range of intermediaries has grown to help arrange international logistics. They fall into two main types. firms that operate facilities within the supply chain. These are firms that actually move the materials, such as international transport operators, shipping lines, port operators, export packers, and so on. And services that help administer movements. These are firms that do not actually move materials themselves, but somehow assist the smooth flow of materials. Most of these intermediaries are involved in transporting goods, and we will consider them again later in the course.